Hello everybody, and welcome to my tutorial video on how I tone panels for painting. I often get questions regarding the methods I use to tone the boards that you see in my Instagram reels, so today we'll cover my process for taking the pure white gesso of the Artefex panel to the ready-to-paint toned board that you see in the foreground. First, because this is primed with an oil ground, we have to use oil paint to tone this thing. So for most boards, I use a combination of 3 different colors. That's raw umber, ivory black, and titanium yellow. This is also called nickel titanate yellow depending on the brand, and you'll see here that I prefer Gamsol. I'll just add all 3 of these paints right into the glass dish that you see here, and I'll mix them thoroughly with a palette knife until they combine into one consistent color. You'll see here, I'm just adjusting the amounts of each pigment based on the color I'm trying to make. These 3 make a really nice desaturated olive or a drab green. As I'm mixing the paint, I'm just watching for threads of unmixed color as they pop up. You'll know everything is just about fully incorporated when you no longer find surprise bits of pure color coming to the surface. You can see here that those 3 colors are now a uniform shade of that green that I mentioned. Once they're mixed completely, I'll grab my bottle of Gamsol mineral spirits, add a generous amount to the dish, and mix thoroughly again with my palette knife. I'm really just looking for a very thin and very fluid consistency to the paint. As you go about mixing this, just keep an eye out for big chunks of paint that haven't fully incorporated into the Gamsol here. You want to make sure that you break those up so that they dissolve into one consistent mixture. Once that paint is thinned nicely to the point of being liquid, I'll grab my bottle of Japan dryer and add a few drops to the mixture. As its name implies, this speeds the drying time of paint significantly. And it's very strong, so you really only need a few drops. Mix those completely into the thin paint until you feel like it's completely incorporated, and you'll be good to go. You can see here that the paint is thinned out very nicely, and it drips right off the palette knife. Next, just clean off your palette knife so you don't accidentally tone your surroundings, and we're ready to brush this onto the board. I use a big ragged brush for this next step because I want to cover a lot of surface area and I don't have to be too precise with it. So go ahead and grab a good brush load of paint and start to spread it onto the panel, just making sure to cover every square inch of it. This will look very dark and opaque at this point, but don't worry, the next step will take care of that. Once the panel is completely covered, set your brush aside and grab a square of cloth. I like to use cut up old t-shirts for this, and fold it until you get a nice even edge to work with. I would avoid using paper towels as they tend to scrape the surface and leave fibers embedded there when the paint dries. Using your newly folded piece of cloth, start to gently wipe the paint away from the surface now. This process is kind of similar to staining wood, where you're aiming to use just enough pressure to leave some paint on the panel to tone the surface, while mostly removing the bulk of the opaque, dark mixture that we brushed on there. Too much pressure can erase right down to the white of the panel again. Don't worry if this happens, you'll see me correct it a few times here. The paint will not only stay fluid for quite some time, but it'll also soak into the cloth. This leaves you plenty of room to get whatever texture you'd like on this board. I personally like the brush strokey effect, so you'll see me tweaking this until I like the look of things overall. When you're happy with the way it looks, your panel's done. Go ahead and put it somewhere safe to dry, and in 24 hours, you'll be ready to paint. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.